Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're doing things a little differently. We're going to treat this as a hands-on safety workshop, tackling a super important topic that's often misunderstood: confined space safety. All right, let's jump right in.
So let me ask you something. When you think about danger at your job, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Maybe it's heavy machinery or working way up high. But what if I told you that one of the deadliest places could be a space you walk right past every single day without a second thought?
The hard truth is, some of the most serious, life-threatening hazards are hiding inside spaces that were never, ever designed for a person to be working in. And those hidden dangers are exactly what we're going to focus on today. To keep ourselves safe, we've got to start with a really clear definition. Understanding what officially counts as a confined space is absolutely the first step to managing the risk. So let's break it down. Okay, this is the official three-point test. It's super simple. First, is the space big enough for you to get your whole body inside? Second, is it tough to get in or out of? Think of a small manhole or a single ladder as the only way. And third, is it a place that's just not meant for someone to hang out and work in all day? If you answer yes to all three of those, then bingo, you're looking at a confined space. Now, this is where we level up the danger. If you take that confined space and add in another serious hazard, we're talking bad air, a risk of being buried alive, stuff like that, it gets a brand new classification. It becomes a permit-required confined space. And that means you can't just go in. You need a formal permit and a whole safety plan.
All right, workshop time. This is where you become the safety inspector. Right now, I want you to take a mental walk through your own job site. Let's start looking for these hidden spaces together. So as we go through these next few examples, I want you to ask yourself, honestly, do we have anything that looks like this where I work? How about these? Silos and hoppers. We see them all the time in farming and manufacturing. They tick all the boxes, right? You can get in, the exits are limited, and you're definitely not supposed to be in there for your whole shift.
Here's another one that people often just don't think about: a dust collector. Yeah, it might look like just another piece of equipment, but it is a perfect example of a confined space that can hide some really nasty atmospheric hazards. And finally, what about pits, vaults, or manholes? I mean, these are everywhere. Utility workers, maintenance crews, they're dealing with these all the time. Again, these are classic, textbook confined spaces. So we've figured out what these spaces are and where they might be hiding. Now we get to the really crucial part. What exactly makes them so incredibly deadly? The number one killer in confined spaces is something you can't see, you can't taste, and you often can't even smell. It's the air itself. The very thing you need to survive becomes the biggest threat. And this shows you exactly why it's so terrifying. An atmosphere can seem perfectly fine 1 second and become deadly the next. It could be a sudden drop in oxygen or a release of toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide. This is why constant, and I mean constant, air monitoring is completely non-negotiable. The second major hazard is something called engulfment. This is a horrifying scenario where a person is basically swallowed up by a liquid or a fine solid. Think grain, sand, or even dirt. Now, look closely at this. In flowing grain, it can take as little as 2 to 3 seconds for a person to become trapped and completely helpless. Think about that. That is terrifyingly fast. The weight and force of the material just crushes the body and makes it impossible to breathe. And finally, the shape of the space itself can be a trap. If the walls slope inward, they can wedge a person, making it impossible for them to rescue themselves. Plus, we've got to worry about all the other stuff: live electrical lines, high-pressure steam pipes, or machinery that could suddenly start moving. Okay, deep breath. We've covered the big 3 dangers. Now let's pull all of that together into a quick checklist that you can use to evaluate any suspicious space at your workplace. So when you look at a space, ask these questions. Is the air safe to breathe? Is there any risk of being buried or drowned? Could the shape of the space trap me? Are there any live electrical lines or moving parts? What about extreme heat or cold, or even just simple slips and falls that become way more dangerous inside? This is the list that turns an ordinary confined space into a permit-required one. We've defined the problem, we've identified the hazards. So what is the single most important first step we can take to keep people safe? Well, it all boils down to one word: awareness. It is the employer's responsibility to survey their entire workplace
Identify every single one of these permit-required spaces and then post clear, obvious warning signs. Everyone, and I mean everyone, needs to know that the danger is there.
And that really brings us to the core takeaway here. A truly effective safety program isn't really about rescuing people. It's about making absolutely sure that a rescue is never, ever needed in the first place. It all starts with preventing anyone from accidentally going into one of these spots. So we're going to end our workshop with this question. After everything we've just talked about, I want you to go back to your job site tomorrow with a fresh set of eyes. Look at those tanks, look at those pits, and really ask yourself, now that I know the risks, how safe is it really?